I am Evelyn, 58 years old, and I built my career at West Point Technologies from the ground up. For over 25 years, I dedicated my life to this company as finance director, helping it grow from a small startup to an industry leader. I was even there when my son Alexander joined the marketing team, and later when he introduced us to his future wife Meredith. I never imagined she would become CEO and publicly humiliate me. If you're watching this from your workplace right now, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments if you've ever witnessed workplace betrayal, because what I'm about to share shook the very foundation of my family and career. My journey with West Point Technologies began in the late 90s when I answered an ad for an accountant position. Back then, we were just a small tech startup with big dreams operating out of what was essentially a converted warehouse with mismatched furniture and temperamental air conditioning. Gerald Wright, the founder, was a brilliant innovator, but needed someone to handle the financial side of things. That someone turned out to be me. I still remember my first interview with Gerald. He looked at my resume, noted my accounting degree and 5 years of experience at a larger firm, and asked simply, "Can you help build something that will last?" I said yes, and that was the start of what would become the most important professional relationship of my life. Those early years were challenging, but exhilarating. We worked long hours, often ordering pizza to the office and staying until midnight to finish projects or prepare for investor meetings. Gerald had the vision and technical expertise, while I made sure we remained financially viable. When we secured our first major client, we celebrated by splurging on actual office chairs instead of the yard sale varieties we'd been using. As the company grew, so did my responsibilities. Within 5 years, I was promoted to financial controller, and 5 years after that, I became the finance director. I built the entire financial infrastructure of the company, implemented systems that scaled with our growth, and personally oversaw each round of funding. By our 10th anniversary, West Point Technologies had grown from 6 employees to over 150, with annual revenue exceeding $20 million. My personal life during this time was focused on raising my son Alexander. His father left when he was just 3 years old, so it was mostly just the two of us. I made sure to involve Alexander in my work life from an early age. He would come to the office after school, sometimes doing homework in the corner of my office while I finished my day. Gerald became something of a father figure to him, always taking time to chat with him and explain the technology side of our business. Alexander was a bright, charismatic child who grew into an equally impressive young man. He had a natural talent for connecting with people and understanding what motivated them, skills that would eventually make him perfect for marketing. When he graduated from college with a business degree, I was thrilled when he expressed interest in joining West Point. "Mom," he said over dinner one night, "I know you might think it's nepotism, but I really want to earn my place at West Point. I've got some ideas about how we could expand our market reach." I was initially hesitant, worried about how it would look to other employees, but Gerald encouraged me. "Talent is talent," he said, and we could use his fresh perspective. So Alexander joined our marketing department as a junior specialist with the clear understanding that he would receive no special treatment due to his connection to me. True to his word, Alexander worked harder than anyone else in his department. He came in early, stayed late, and quickly made himself invaluable. His first marketing campaign increased our lead generation by 40%, and within 3 years, he was heading his own team. I was careful to recuse myself from any discussions about his promotions or salary, wanting there to be no question that he earned everything on his own merit. It was at the company's 15th anniversary gala that Alexander first introduced me to Meredith. She was stunning in a simple black dress with intelligent eyes and a firm handshake. She worked for a competitor at the time in their project management office. Alexander had met her at an industry conference and was clearly smitten. "It's wonderful to finally meet you," Meredith said, her smile warm and engaging. "Alexander talks about you constantly. You've built something truly impressive here." I was immediately charmed. She asked thoughtful questions about the company's history and my role in its growth, seeming genuinely interested in understanding the journey we'd been on. By the end of the evening, I found myself hoping this relationship would last. Their courtship was relatively brief. Within a year, Alexander proposed, and they began planning their wedding. I threw myself into helping them organizing the rehearsal dinner and offering to help wherever I could. The wedding was beautiful, intimate, but elegant, and I felt I was gaining a daughter rather than losing a son. Not long after they returned from their honeymoon, Meredith mentioned she was looking for a new professional challenge. Her current company was undergoing a restructuring, and she was concerned about her department's future. "She's brilliant at what she does, Mom," Alexander told me over lunch one day. "Her project management skills are exceptional. Do you think there might be an opening at West Point?" I was initially cautious. Having both my son and his wife at the company seemed potentially complicated, but after reviewing her impressive resume and speaking with her previous supervisors, I realized she would be an asset to our team. I recommended her for a junior project management position, making it clear to the hiring manager that they should evaluate her strictly on her qualifications. Meredith joined West Point about 6 months after her marriage to Alexander. She quickly proved herself to be competent, organized, and ambitious. Her projects were completed on time and under budget, and she showed a knack for smoothing over interpersonal conflicts that might otherwise have derailed timelines. Gerald particularly appreciated her ability to translate between the technical teams and the business stakeholders. Around this time, Gerald began talking about retirement. He was in his early 60s and wanted to spend more time with his grandchildren and pursuing personal interests. "I've given this company 20 years of my life," he told me during one of our regular coffee meetings. "It's time to plan for West Point's future beyond me." The board began discussions about succession planning. As finance director and one of the longest-serving executives, I was naturally considered a candidate for the CEO position. Other candidates included our Chief Technology Officer, Robert, and our Head of Sales, Diana. The discussions were preliminary, but I allowed myself to think it might be possible. After all, I knew every aspect of the company intimately and had helped steer us through both growth periods and challenging times. What I didn't realize then was that while I was helping build a company, I was also creating the perfect stage for what would become the most painful betrayal of my professional and personal life. And the person I had welcomed as a daughter would be the one to orchestrate it all. The first signs of trouble were subtle. I noticed that Meredith was advancing through the ranks at an unusual pace. Just 18 months after joining the company, she was promoted from junior project manager to department head, skipping several steps in the normal progression. While she was undoubtedly talented, such rapid advancement raised eyebrows among longer-serving employees. When I casually mentioned this to Alexander over our monthly mother-son dinner, he became defensive. "Mom Meredith works harder than anyone. She's regularly putting in 12-hour days and has completely revamped the project management methodology. Her promotion was completely earned." I backed off, not wanting to create tension. "I'm sure you're right. I just want to make sure the other employees don't feel the system is unfair." Alexander's expression softened slightly. "I understand that. But you should see her in action. She's really impressive." I decided to keep my concerns to myself. After all, I had always been careful not to give Alexander special treatment, and I needed to extend the same professional courtesy to Meredith. Still, I couldn't help but notice how quickly she was becoming a rising star at West Point. Around this time, I began to notice subtle changes in Meredith's behavior toward me. The warm familiarity of our early relationship cooled. In meetings, she began questioning my financial projections in ways that felt less like professional rigor and more like attempts to undermine my authority. During one particularly tense budget meeting, Meredith challenged my conservative revenue estimates for the upcoming quarter. "I think these projections are unnecessarily cautious," she said, her voice carrying a slight edge. "My team's projects are tracking well ahead of schedule, which should allow for earlier than anticipated revenue recognition." "While I appreciate your optimism, Meredith," I responded, keeping my tone measured, "our financial reporting needs to be based on established patterns and confirmed contracts, not best-case scenarios." She smiled tightly. "Perhaps that's the old-school approach, but in today's fast-moving market, we need to be more aggressive." The phrase "old school" stung more than it should have. At 58, I was certainly one of the older executives, but I had always prided myself on adapting to changing business conditions. Was I becoming outdated without realizing it? This interaction was just the beginning. Increasingly, I noticed younger employees gravitating toward Meredith's leadership style. She organized after-work social events that tended to exclude the older members of the management team. She championed new technologies and approaches, sometimes dismissing established processes as legacy thinking. The generational divide became more pronounced. In one technology planning meeting, when I asked for clarification about a new cloud platform, Meredith exchanged a knowing look with the IT director. "It's similar to the systems we used in the early 2000s, Evelyn, just much more advanced," she explained in a tone one might use with a confused elderly relative. "Digital natives find it quite intuitive." The implication was clear: I belonged to a different era. The fact that I had overseen multiple technology transitions throughout my career seemed forgotten. Even more concerning was a shift happening at the board level. Two of Gerald's original board members, who had been supportive of my potential CEO candidacy, announced their retirement. They were replaced by younger executives from other tech companies, both of whom seemed impressed by Meredith's modern approach to business. Gerald himself was less present. He had begun experiencing health issues that required more of his attention, meaning he attended fewer meetings and was less involved in day-to-day decisions. Without realizing it, I had lost my strongest ally in the company. Alexander's behavior was also changing. He began siding with Meredith in strategic disagreements, sometimes contradicting positions he had previously supported. When I tried to discuss company matters with him privately, he would deflect or claim he needed to remain neutral due to his relationship with Meredith. "I can't get caught in the middle, Mom," he said during one such conversation. "It's already complicated enough working in the same company as my mother and my wife." I felt increasingly isolated. Meetings that I had once been automatically included in were now happening without me. Strategic decisions were being made, then presented as fait accompli. When I raised concerns, I was told that the discussions had needed to move quickly, and they hadn't wanted to bog things down. One particular incident stands out in my memory. I discovered that a major new initiative had been approved without the usual financial due diligence. When I raised this with the project lead, he looked uncomfortable. "Meredith assured us that you were in the loop," he said. "She mentioned that you were busy with the quarterly closing and had given preliminary approval." I had done no such thing, and when I confronted Meredith, she claimed it was a miscommunication. "I said we would get your formal sign-off before implementation," she explained smoothly, "but the initial concept had already been socialized with you in the executive briefing last month." It was a half-truth at best, but challenging it further would have made me appear petty or forgetful. I began documenting these incidents, not yet sure what I would do with the information, but feeling that something wasn't right. The most painful part was watching Alexander withdraw from me both professionally and personally. Our monthly dinners became less frequent, and when we did meet, he seemed distracted and eager to leave. He rarely came to my office anymore, and when I went to his, Meredith would often appear within minutes, as if she had some sixth sense that we were talking. "Am I interrupting something?" she would ask with a pleasant smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Not at all," Alexander would typically respond. "We were just catching up." I began to wonder if my son was slipping away from me, caught in his wife's orbit, and unable or unwilling to maintain our close relationship. It was a heartbreaking thought that kept me awake many nights. The culmination of these tensions came during a strategic planning retreat. The executive team was discussing the company's 5-year vision, and I had prepared a comprehensive financial strategy that balanced growth with stability. As I began my presentation, I noticed several executives checking their phones or exchanging glances. Halfway through, Meredith raised her hand. "I think we might be approaching this from an outdated paradigm," she said. "I've taken the liberty of drafting an alternative financial strategy that leverages more contemporary financing vehicles and aggressive growth targets." She proceeded to distribute copies of her own presentation, effectively hijacking my session. What was most shocking was that she had clearly been working on this for weeks, perhaps months, and had never mentioned it to me, despite the fact that financial strategy fell squarely within my area of responsibility. As I looked around the room, I saw that no one seemed surprised. They had known this was coming. Even Alexander avoided my eyes, studying Meredith's document with exaggerated interest. In that moment, I realized how vulnerable my position had become. After 25 years of loyal service, I was being systematically sidelined, but nothing could have prepared me for just how public and cruel my eventual humiliation would be. The email announcing a company-wide meeting came on a Monday morning. The subject line read simply, "Important leadership announcement. Wednesday 10 a.m. Mandatory attendance." Given the timing and Gerald's decreased involvement in the company, I suspected this might be the long-anticipated CEO announcement. I had been preparing for this possibility for weeks. Although I knew my chances had diminished, I still hoped the board would recognize my contributions and experience. Just in case, I had drafted a brief congratulatory speech for whomever was selected, determined to handle the situation with grace if it wasn't me. The night before the announcement, I tried calling Alexander to gauge if he knew anything, but he didn't pick up. Instead, he sent a text, "Sorry, Mom. Crazy busy preparing for tomorrow. Talk after the meeting." His evasiveness struck me as odd, but I dismissed it as pre-meeting stress. Alexander had been working on a major marketing initiative, and I assumed he was finalizing details for a presentation. Wednesday morning arrived, and I dressed with particular care, a tailored navy suit that projected confidence and professionalism. When I arrived at the office, there was a palpable buzz in the air. People were speaking in hushed tones, which fell silent when I approached. Several younger employees smiled at me with what seemed like pity, further unsettling my nerves. The most peculiar thing was that the meeting location had been changed from our usual conference room to the largest open space in the building, an atrium that could accommodate the entire company. Chairs had been arranged theater-style with a small stage set up at the front. It seemed excessive for a simple announcement. As I made my way to the front row where executive team members typically sat, I noticed Alexander wasn't there yet. Even stranger, my usual seat had a reserved sign on it. When I asked the administrative assistant about it, she looked flustered. "Oh, Ms. Evelyn, I thought you'd been informed. The seating arrangement was changed late yesterday." I was directed to a seat in the second row, while my executive team colleagues remained in the front. It was a small thing, but it felt like another piece in a puzzle I couldn't quite solve. The room filled quickly, and still no sign of Alexander. Then, just minutes before the meeting was scheduled to begin, Meredith entered from a side door. I hardly recognized her at first. Gone was her usual business casual attire, replaced by an impeccably tailored designer suit that screamed executive authority. Her hair was styled differently, her makeup more pronounced. She looked like someone playing the role of CEO in a corporate drama. She was accompanied by 2 board members and Gerald's longtime assistant, who looked uncomfortable. They took seats on the stage as the room hushed. The board chairman, Thomas, stepped up to the microphone. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this momentous occasion in West Point's history. As you know, Gerald Wright has been reducing his involvement in day-to-day operations as he focuses on his health. The board has been working diligently to identify the right leadership to take West Point into its next chapter." I felt a flutter of anxiety in my stomach, but maintained a neutral expression. Thomas continued, "After careful consideration, we are pleased to announce that effective immediately, the new Chief Executive Officer of West Point Technologies will be Meredith Johnson." The room erupted in applause, though I noticed it was primarily from the younger employees. Many of the longtime staff looked as shocked as I felt. Meredith. Not even the CTO or the head of sales, but Meredith. Someone who had been with the company less than 3 years. Meredith stepped forward, accepting the microphone with practiced ease. Her smile was radiant, triumphant. "Thank you, Thomas, and thank you to the board for this incredible opportunity. I am honored and humbled to be entrusted with Gerald's legacy and the future of West Point Technologies." She paused for effect, surveying the room. "As we move forward, West Point will need to evolve. The tech landscape has changed dramatically since our founding, and to remain competitive, we must embrace innovation, agility, and fresh thinking. Today marks not just a change in leadership, but a complete reimagining of what this company can be." I sat frozen in my seat, struggling to process what was happening. Where was Gerald in all this? Had he approved this decision? And Alexander, his absence now felt ominous rather than coincidental. Meredith continued, her voice growing more confident with each word. "As part of this new vision, we will be implementing an immediate restructuring of several departments to better align with market realities and eliminate redundancies." My stomach dropped. Restructuring was corporate speak for layoffs. "I believe in transparency, so I want to address these changes directly. Meredith said, pulling out a tablet. "The following departments will see significant reorganization effective immediately." She began listing departments and the names of those being transitioned out of the company. With each name, security personnel would approach the person and escort them from the room. It was humiliating, cruel, and completely contrary to the compassionate culture we had built over decades. I watched in horror as loyal employees, some who had been with the company for 10-15 years, were publicly terminated. With each name, the tension in the room grew. People avoided eye contact, terrified they might be next. After going through several departments, Meredith paused dramatically. I realized with sinking clarity that she had saved the finance department for last. My department. "Finally, we come to finance," she said, her eyes finding mine in the crowd. "As we modernize our financial approaches to support more aggressive growth, we'll be bringing in specialists in contemporary financial strategies. Unfortunately, this means some of our more traditional financial team members will be departing." She listed 3 junior members of my team, then paused again, letting the tension build. "And lastly, after lengthy deliberation, the board has decided that the role of finance director will be eliminated with responsibilities distributed among a new financial operations team. Evelyn, thank you for your years of service, but as of today, your position has been terminated." The room went completely silent. All eyes turned to me, but Meredith wasn't finished. She added with barely concealed disdain, "We don't want outdated people in the company who can't keep up with where we're headed. West Point needs forward-thinking individuals who embrace change, not those clinging to obsolete methods." The words hit like physical blows. Outdated. Obsolete. After 25 years of building this company, after mentoring countless employees, including Meredith herself, after sacrificing weekends and holidays, and my own health at times for West Point's success, I was being dismissed as irrelevant. And not privately with dignity, but publicly in front of the entire company. I felt my face flush with humiliation, but years of presenting to boards and investors had taught me how to control my expressions. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I stood slowly, straightened my jacket, and looked her directly in the eyes. "I wish you and the company every success," I said, my voice remarkably steady. Then I turned and walked toward the exit, back straight, head high, even as I felt my world collapsing around me. As I reached the door, I heard Meredith's voice again, already moving on to discuss her exciting new vision for the company. Not a single word of genuine thanks for my decades of service. Not even the courtesy of a private conversation before this public execution. Outside the meeting room, a security guard was waiting. "I'm sorry, Ms. Evelyn," he said, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "I've been instructed to escort you to collect your personal belongings and then to the exit." The final indignity. I was now a security risk to the very company I had helped build from nothing. The walk to my office felt like a funeral procession. Employees peeked from doorways, some looking away in embarrassment when they caught my eye, others offering small gestures of support, a nod, a sad smile, a mouthed, "I'm sorry." The security guard Tom had worked at West Point for over a decade, and his discomfort was palpable. "Take whatever time you need, Ms. Evelyn," he said quietly as we reached my office. "I'll wait outside." My office, a corner space I'd occupied for 15 years, was a testament to my history with the company. Awards lined the walls, photos documented company milestones, and my desk held framed pictures of Alexander throughout the years from his graduation to his wedding. I stood in the doorway for a moment, overwhelmed by the task of dismantling 25 years of professional life in what would likely be minutes. I began with the photos, carefully wrapping each frame in tissue paper I kept in my desk for gift-giving occasions. As I packed, I tried calling Alexander again, straight to voicemail. Where was he during all this? Did he know what his wife was planning? Had he approved of my public humiliation? The questions burned, but I forced myself to focus on the task at hand. I had been through difficult times before becoming a single mother at 25, weathering the 2008 financial crisis that nearly bankrupted the company, losing my own mother to cancer 3 years ago. I would survive this too somehow. As I emptied my desk drawers, I discovered a flash drive I didn't recognize. Curious, I plugged it into my computer and found it contained copies of financial reports, the quarterly statements I had prepared last month. But something was off. The numbers didn't match my recollection. Revenue was inflated by nearly 15%, and several expense categories seemed artificially reduced. I quickly checked our secure financial system, comparing the official filed reports with what I was seeing on the flash drive. They didn't match. The system showed my original accurate reports, but the versions on the drive, the ones that had apparently been presented to the board, had been altered. My mind raced. Was this why Meredith had been so eager to push me out? Had she been manipulating financial data to make her performance look better than it was? To justify her rapid rise through the ranks? I was about to dig deeper when my former assistant Janet appeared at the door. Her eyes were red from crying. "Evelyn, I'm so sorry," she whispered, glancing nervously at Tom, who considerately stepped further away to give us privacy. "This isn't right. None of it." I embraced her briefly. Janet had been with me for 12 years, a loyal and efficient professional who knew almost as much about the company's finances as I did. "Thank you, Janet. I'll be fine. Are you—" "I still have my job," she said. "For now. But the atmosphere out there is terrible. People are scared, confused." She leaned closer, her voice dropping even further. "Listen, I've been noticing strange things in the financial approvals. Projects getting greenlit without proper review budgets inflated beyond normal parameters, all routed through Meredith's office." So it wasn't just my imagination. Janet confirmed my suspicions, then pressed a folder into my hands. "I've been keeping copies, just in case. I probably shouldn't be giving you this, but you built this company. You deserve to know." I slipped the folder into my box of belongings, deeply touched by her loyalty and courage. "Be careful, Janet. Document everything but protect yourself." She nodded, squeezed my hand, and hurried away as Tom stepped back toward the doorway. "Almost done, Ms. Evelyn." "Just a few more things," I replied, gathering the last of my personal items. I left behind the company awards and plaques. Those belonged to West Point's history, not to me personally. As Tom escorted me through the building, we passed the wall of company photos in the main hallway. There I was, 25 years younger, standing beside Gerald at the ribbon cutting of our first real office. Another showed the executive team celebrating our first $1 million contract, my financial projections having helped secure the deal. The most recent addition was from last year's holiday party, the executive team raising glasses in a toast. I wondered how long before these photos would be removed, the company's history rewritten to minimize my role. We reached the lobby, and Tom hesitated. "Ms. Evelyn, for what it's worth, this isn't how most of us wanted to see you go. You've always been fair, always looked out for the staff. The holiday bonus program, the educational assistance fund, those were your initiatives. People don't forget that kind of thing." His words were a small balm on the raw wound of the day's events. "Thank you, Tom. That means a lot." As I approached the main entrance, Meredith appeared, apparently having concluded her meeting. She was surrounded by several younger executives, all nodding enthusiastically at whatever she was saying. When she spotted me, she excused herself and approached her expression a carefully constructed mask of professional regret. "Evelyn, I hope you understand this was strictly a business decision. The company needs to move in a new direction, embrace new methodologies. It's nothing personal." Nothing personal. The absurdity of that statement, after the deliberately humiliating way she had handled my termination, was breathtaking. But I would not give her the satisfaction of an emotional response. "Of course," I replied coolly. "Every CEO must make difficult decisions. I wish you luck. You'll need it." Her smile faltered slightly at my calm demeanor. She had wanted tears, anger, something to confirm her narrative that I was too emotional, too outdated for modern business. "Security will deactivate your access credentials by end of day," she said, recovering quickly. "If you've left anything behind, you can contact HR to arrange retrieval." I was about to respond when movement at the entrance caught my attention. The glass doors slid open, and Alexander rushed in looking disheveled and out of breath. He stopped short when he saw me standing there with my box of belongings, Tom the security guard at my side, and Meredith looking triumphant. The color drained from his face as his eyes moved from the box in my arms to Meredith's executive attire to my carefully composed expression. In that moment, I saw confusion, then dawning comprehension, followed by something I hadn't seen in his eyes for a long time, concern for me. "Mom, what's happening? I just got back from the Atlanta client meeting and saw all these messages." He held up his phone. "Why are you carrying a box? Why is Tom escorting you?" So he hadn't known. The realization brought a complex mix of relief and fresh pain. My son hadn't been complicit in my humiliation, but his wife had acted without even informing him. Before I could answer, Meredith stepped forward and placed a proprietary hand on Alexander's arm. "Darling, there you are. I've been trying to reach you. We had the leadership announcement today. The board selected me as CEO." That's wonderful," Alexander stammered, still looking at me. "But why is Mom being escorted out?" Meredith's grip on his arm tightened visibly. "As part of our restructuring, we've eliminated several positions, including your mother's. It was a board decision, completely standard procedure for executive transitions." "Standard procedure?" Alexander echoed, his voice rising. "Having security escort out someone who's given 25 years to this company, someone who helped build it from nothing." I could see Meredith's carefully constructed narrative beginning to crack. This public confrontation with her husband wasn't part of her script. She pulled Alexander aside, speaking urgently in hushed tones. I could see his expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, and growing anger. I knew I should leave, that staying would only make this more painful, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. This was my son caught between his wife and his mother, and despite everything, my heart ached for the position he was in. Alexander abruptly pulled away from Meredith and turned back to me. "Mom, wait. This isn't right. Let me fix this." "It's done, Alexander," I said gently. "We can talk later." I turned to go, but not before I caught a glimpse of Meredith's face, her expression shifting from momentary panic to calculated determination. She was already formulating her next move, and I realized with sudden clarity that this was just the beginning of whatever game she was playing. As I walked out of the building that had been my second home for over 2 decades, I felt oddly light, as if I was leaving behind more than just a job. What awaited me outside those doors was unknown, frightening, but also potentially liberating. And with the flash drive in my pocket and Janet's folder in my box, I carried with me the first pieces of what might become a path back, not to reclaim my old position, but to protect the company I still cared about from whatever Meredith was planning. The shock didn't fully hit until I reached my car. My hands trembled so badly I couldn't get the key into the ignition. 25 years, gone in an instant. Not just my job, but my identity, my daily purpose, my work, family, all stripped away in the most humiliating manner possible. I sat in the parking lot, allowing myself 5 minutes of pure emotional release. I cried for the loss, for the betrayal, for the uncertainty ahead. Then I wiped my eyes, reapplied my lipstick, using the rearview mirror, and drove home with deliberate calm. I had always taught Alexander that how we respond to crises reveals our true character. I would not let Meredith's cruelty turn me into someone I didn't recognize. My house felt unusually quiet when I arrived. I'd lived there for 20 years, raising Alexander in this 3-bedroom colonial with its slightly overgrown garden and creaky third stair. Now the silence seemed to mock me. No emails demanding immediate attention, no conference calls to prepare for, no financial reports to review, just silence and the box of belongings that somehow represented a quarter-century of professional achievement. I had just made myself a cup of tea when the doorbell rang. Opening it revealed Gerald Wright, looking frailer than when I'd last seen him, but with the same sharp intelligence in his eyes. He leaned heavily on a cane, his once robust frame now thin beneath his sweater. "Gerald," I said, genuinely surprised. "Come in. Should you be out? I thought your doctors wanted you resting." He snorted dismissively as he made his way to my living room sofa. "Those quacks would have me bedridden if they had their way. Some things are more important than rest, Evelyn, like loyalty, friendship." I brought him tea, and for a moment we sat in companionable silence, 25 years of partnership, making words temporarily unnecessary. Finally, Gerald spoke. "I heard what happened. Margaret, my nurse's daughter, works in customer support. She called her mother in tears, who then called me. I came as soon as I could." I nodded, emotion threatening to overwhelm me again. "Did you know about Meredith becoming CEO?" Gerald's face darkened. "I knew the board was considering her among other candidates. Thomas called me last week to consult, though it was clear the decision was already made. What I didn't know was that they planned to terminate you, and certainly not in such a disgraceful manner." He leaned forward, his voice strengthening with anger. "That's not the company we built, Evelyn. We always treated people with dignity, even when difficult decisions had to be made." "Why Meredith?" I asked the question that had been burning inside me. "She's barely been with the company 3 years. She has no experience running an organization of our size." Gerald sighed heavily. "Politics, primarily." Thomas and the newer board members were impressed by her presentations on digital transformation and disruption methodologies. Lots of buzzwords, very little substance. But more concerning, I believe she's been systematically working to undermine your position for months. How so? Board manipulations. Quiet conversations suggesting that your more conservative financial approach was holding the company back. Presentations showing how her projects outperformed projections while conveniently omitting the risks you had identified. He paused. "And I suspect something more troubling. The financial reports I received recently seemed unusual, growth numbers that didn't align with market conditions." I reached for the folder Janet had given me. "Like these." We spent the next hour reviewing the documents, comparing them with copies Gerald had brought. A pattern emerged. Project budgets inflated after approval revenue recognition, accelerated beyond standard accounting practices expenses, mysteriously recategorized. All subtle enough to avoid immediate detection, but significant when taken together. "She's been cooking the books," Gerald said finally, his expression grim, "making her initiatives look more successful than they are possibly to position herself for the CEO role." The doorbell rang again. This time it was Alexander, looking like he'd aged years in the hours since I'd seen him at West Point. Without a word, he pulled me into a tight embrace. "Mom, I had no idea," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I swear to you, I didn't know what she was planning." I believed him. The shock and distress in his eyes couldn't be faked, not by my son, whom I'd raised alone, whose every expression I knew. "The Atlanta trip," he explained as we moved to the living room, where Gerald greeted him with a nod. "It was Meredith's idea. She said it was crucial I meet with the client personally, that it could be our biggest account yet. She even rescheduled it from next week to yesterday, insisting it couldn't wait. To ensure you wouldn't be present for the announcement," I concluded. Alexander's face contorted with anger and pain. "She knew how I would react. She knew I would never allow them to treat you that way." "How much did you know about her becoming CEO?" Gerald asked, his tone gentle but probing. Alexander ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. He looked like the teenage boy who would sit at this very table struggling with calculus homework. "She mentioned being considered, said the board was impressed with her vision for the company's future, but she presented it as a long shot, something that might happen a year or two down the line." His voice grew harder. "She never said it was imminent, and she certainly never mentioned restructuring or firing anyone, especially not you, Mom." "What happened after I left?" I asked. Alexander's expression darkened further. "We had a confrontation right there in the lobby. When I realized what she'd done, I just couldn't believe it. We went to her new office Mom with a view of the park, and I demanded explanations. She kept talking about necessary business decisions and generational transitions in leadership." He stopped, seeming to struggle with what to say next. "It's okay, Alexander. You can tell me." When I pressed her on why she'd handled your termination so cruelly, she finally snapped, said you'd had your time, that the company needed to move beyond the old guard, that sometimes public examples were necessary to change company culture. His voice broke. "She talked about you like you were an obstacle, not my mother, not someone who'd mentored her, welcomed her into our family." The pain in his voice made it clear this betrayal was affecting him on multiple levels, both professional and deeply personal. His wife, the woman he loved, had revealed a capacity for cruelty he hadn't known existed. "Our marriage has been strained lately," he admitted. Meredith's been working later, more obsessed with advancement, less interested in our plans for starting a family. But I never imagined she could do something like this." Gerald cleared his throat. "I hate to add to your troubles, Alexander, but there's more." He gestured to the financial documents spread across my coffee table. "We've found discrepancies in the company's financial reporting, serious ones." As we showed Alexander the evidence, his face grew increasingly pale. "These are projects Meredith directly oversaw," he said, pointing to several entries. "She assured me they were performing above expectations, that they'd revolutionize our market position." "They appear to be performing above expectations because the numbers have been manipulated," I explained gently. "Revenue inflated expenses, hidden projections adjusted after the fact." Alexander was silent for a long moment, staring at the papers as if they might transform into something less damning. "What do we do now?" Just then my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously. "Ms. Adams, this is Kyle Patterson from accounting. We haven't met often. I work mostly with the audit team. I'm sorry to call you at home, but something's happening that doesn't feel right, and I didn't know who else to contact." I put the call on speaker so Gerald and Alexander could hear. "What is it, Kyle?" "There's an emergency audit being conducted ordered by Ms. Johnson. The team is going through all the financial records, focusing on the last 2 years of reports, those under your direct supervision. They're looking for something specific, but won't tell us what." My blood ran cold. "They're trying to pin the discrepancies on me," I realized aloud. "Create a narrative that I mismanaged finances and Meredith discovered it." "That's what I feared," Kyle said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Several of us in accounting know something's not right. The numbers they're focusing on don't align with the original reports we worked on. It's like they're cherry-picking data to create a specific story." "Can you document what you're seeing, Kyle, safely without putting yourself at risk?" "Already started, Ms. Adams. Janet suggested creating backup copies before anything could be altered. A few of us have been quietly keeping records just in case." My heart swelled with gratitude. Even in my absence, there were people at West Point who valued truth and integrity. "Thank you, Kyle. Be careful, and only contact me on this number, not my company email or phone." After the call ended, the three of us sat in silence, processing the implications. Meredith wasn't just consolidating power. She was actively working to destroy my reputation and possibly set me up to take the fall for her financial manipulations. "We need a plan," Gerald said finally, the old strategic thinker emerging through his frail exterior. "This isn't just about your wrongful termination anymore, Evelyn. The company itself could be at risk if these financial practices continue or expand." Alexander straightened a determination in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. "I'm still on the inside. I can gather information, keep track of what she's doing." "That puts you in a difficult position," I cautioned, "both professionally and in your marriage." He met my gaze steadily. "She put me in this position when she betrayed you and the company's values. I need to do what's right, even if it's hard." Over the next few hours, we developed a strategy. Alexander would continue working at West Point, keeping his concerns private while documenting any questionable activities. Gerald would discreetly contact several board members he still trusted, sharing our concerns without making direct accusations. And I would consult with Lawrence Brennan, a corporate attorney who had worked with West Point in its early days and whom I trusted implicitly. As evening fell, Gerald called his driver to take him home, embracing me before he left. "We built something good, Evelyn," he said. "Something honest. We won't let it be corrupted." Alexander lingered, clearly reluctant to return to the home he shared with Meredith. "I don't know if I can face her tonight," he admitted. "Pretend everything's normal." "You don't have to decide anything right now about your marriage," I told him gently. "One step at a time. For tonight, you're welcome to stay in your old room." He shook his head. "If I don't go home, she'll know something's wrong. I need to play my part until we figure this out." He hugged me tightly. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I brought her into our lives, into the company." "You couldn't have known," I assured him. "None of us saw this coming." After he left, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by the evidence of Meredith's betrayal and manipulation. The hurt was still raw, the humiliation still fresh, but something else was growing alongside it: determination. This wasn't just about my job anymore. It was about protecting a company that had been built on integrity, about standing up against injustice, and perhaps most importantly, about showing my son that when faced with cruelty, we don't break, we rise. The next morning, I awoke with a sense of purpose that had been missing in the chaos of the previous day. After 25 years of continuous employment, I now had something I hadn't experienced in decades unstructured time. I decided to use it strategically. My first call was to Lawrence Brennan, the attorney Gerald had suggested. Lawrence had helped draft West Point's original incorporation documents and had a reputation for uncompromising ethics. Now in his 60s, he had scaled back his practice, but still took select cases. "Evelyn Adams," he said warmly when he returned my call. "It's been 10 years Gerald mentioned you might be calling. I understand you're in a situation." I gave him a concise overview, my years of making executive presentations serving me well as I outlined the facts without emotional editorializing. I explained my abrupt termination, the financial discrepancies we had discovered, and our concerns about Meredith's intentions. "This is troubling on multiple levels," Lawrence said when I finished. "The manner of your termination potentially violates several employment regulations, particularly given your long tenure. But these financial irregularities, that's what concerns me most. If the new CEO is manipulating financial data, especially for a company of West Point's size, we're potentially looking at securities fraud." "What's our first step?" I asked. "Documentation and verification. We need to confirm these discrepancies through multiple sources. Your assistant's copies are a start, but we need more. The whistleblower Kyle is crucial, and Alexander, though, his position is complicated." We scheduled an in-person meeting for the following day, and I spent the rest of the morning organizing the documents we had gathered so far, creating a timeline of suspicious activities and financial manipulations. Around noon, I received a text from Alexander. "Emergency executive meeting called. M presenting new strategic plan. Atmosphere tense. We'll update later." I tried not to worry, reminding myself that Alexander was a capable adult who had proven his loyalty. Still knowing he was walking into a potentially hostile situation under Meredith's watchful eye made my stomach knot with anxiety. Gerald called in the afternoon. "I've spoken with James and Patricia," he said, referring to 2 long-standing board members. "Without revealing everything, I expressed concerns about the company's direction and the manner of your departure. They were disturbed, particularly Patricia. She said the board was told you had been planning retirement and the restructuring was mutually agreed upon." "That's completely false," I said, anger flaring anew. "There was never any discussion of retirement or mutual agreement." "Exactly. They're being fed a narrative that doesn't match reality. Patricia has requested a private conversation with you. She wants to hear your side directly." This was a significant development. Patricia Chen had been on the board for 15 years and was known for her thoroughness and integrity. If she was questioning the official story, others might as well. Later that evening, Alexander called. He sounded exhausted. "Meredith's moving fast," he said without preamble. Today she announced a complete reorganization of the company structure and a new aggressive growth strategy. The targets she's setting are wildly optimistic, bordering on impossible. Is she continuing the financial manipulation? It looks that way. She's created a new reporting structure that centralizes all financial approvals through her office. Janet and the accounting team are being sidelined, their concerns dismissed, and she's bringing in a new CFO, someone she worked with at her previous company. That gives her even more control over the financial narrative, I noted. What about the company culture? How are people responding? Alexander's sigh spoke volumes. It's divided. Some of the younger employees are excited by her energy and promises of rapid advancement, but the veteran staff are unsettled. 3 senior engineers submitted resignations today. Meredith spun it as making room for fresh perspectives, but people know better. "And how are things between you two?" I asked gently. A long pause. "Strained. I'm trying to maintain normalcy, but every time I look at her, I see her standing on that stage deliberately humiliating you. She notices my withdrawal and keeps asking what's wrong. I've blamed it on work stress." "Be careful, Alexander. She's proven she's willing to go to extreme lengths to achieve her goals." I know. Today I found her going through my email when she thought I was in a meeting. She claimed she was looking for a client contact, but her reaction when I walked in was too defensive. His voice lowered. Mom, I'm starting to wonder who I actually married. The pain in his voice broke my heart. Meredith's betrayal was professional for me, but for Alexander, it was profoundly personal, shattering his trust in the woman he had chosen to share his life with. Over the next few days, a pattern emerged. Meredith was rapidly implementing changes at West Point, replacing key personnel with her own selections, centralizing decision-making authority, and pushing forward with her aggressive growth strategy. Meanwhile, our small resistance group was gathering evidence and building allies. Lawrence confirmed that my termination likely violated employment law, particularly the lack of severance for a long-term executive. But a wrongful termination suit is small thinking, he said during our strategy session. What we're uncovering is potentially criminal financial misrepresentation. Kyle from accounting continued providing information documenting specific instances where Meredith's team altered financial records. Janet, still working as an executive assistant, but now assigned to the new CFO, managed to copy additional incriminating emails. A full week after my termination, Patricia Chen met me for coffee at a small cafe 30 miles from West Point, well away from where we might be recognized. I knew something wasn't right, she said after I showed her some of our evidence. The story we were told about your departure never aligned with what I knew of your character or your commitment to West Point. But this, she tapped the documents, this goes beyond a leadership dispute. What's the board's perspective on Meredith so far? I asked. Patricia frowned. Mixed. She's charismatic, persuasive. The newer members are impressed by her vision and energy. But those of us who've been around longer who remember the company's core values, we're growing concerned. The rapid personnel changes, the sudden shift in strategy, the unrealistic projections, it feels unsustainable and potentially dangerous. Would the board be willing to reconsider her appointment if presented with evidence of financial impropriety? The board takes its fiduciary responsibility seriously. If there's clear evidence of misconduct, we would be obligated to act. She hesitated. But Evelyn, you should know Meredith is already working to undermine your credibility. She suggested to several board members that you might have been responsible for certain accounting irregularities that she supposedly discovered. Just as we had suspected, Meredith was trying to make me the scapegoat. The realization hardened my resolve. By the end of the second week, we had accumulated enough evidence to present a compelling case. Lawrence advised calling an emergency board meeting with Gerald, using his founder status to convene it. The meeting was set for Monday morning. The night before, Alexander came to my house directly from work, looking troubled. Meredith knows something's happening, he said. She's been making frantic calls all day, meeting with her new CFO behind closed doors. When I asked about her schedule for tomorrow, she was evasive. Has she discovered your involvement? I don't think so, but she suspects I'm not fully supporting her leadership. We had a huge fight last night. She accused me of undermining her authority at work, of still being a mama's boy. His expression was a mixture of anger and sadness. When I confronted her about how she treated you, she said business required tough decisions, and I needed to cut the apron strings. I felt a surge of protective instinct toward my son, who was caught in an impossible situation. Alexander, whatever happens tomorrow, remember that you've done the right thing. Standing for truth and integrity is never wrong, even when it's painful. He nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. I know. And Mom, I'm proud to be your son. Always have been. The morning of the board meeting arrived with a sense of gravity. Gerald, Alexander, Lawrence, and I gathered at Gerald's home to review our presentation one final time. Kyle and Janet would meet us at the West Point offices, bringing the final pieces of evidence. Once we present this information, there's no going back, Lawrence cautioned. Are we all prepared for the potential consequences? We exchanged looks, each of us understanding the stakes. For Gerald, it was about protecting the legacy of the company he founded. For Alexander, it meant the likely end of his marriage. For me, while vindication was part of it, my primary motivation had evolved. This was about justice, not just for me, but for the company and people I still cared deeply about. We're ready, I confirmed, speaking for all of us. We arrived at West Point to find an atmosphere of tension. Word had spread that an emergency board meeting had been called, though the purpose remained confidential. As we walked through the lobby, employees stopped to stare particularly at Gerald, who rarely visited since his health declined, and at me, whose dramatic exit was still fresh in office memory. Meredith was already in the boardroom when we entered, along with her new CFO and the board members. Her expression when she saw me was a study in rapidly cycling emotions: shock, anger, calculation, and finally, a forced smile. "Gerald, what a pleasant surprise," she said, ignoring me completely. "The board wasn't expecting you today. And Evelyn, this is unusual. Board meetings are typically limited to current executives and directors." "I've invited them both," Patricia Chen interjected smoothly. "Given the nature of the information being presented today, their presence is not just appropriate but necessary." Thomas, the board chairman who had announced Meredith's promotion, frowned. "What information?" The agenda simply stated, "Urgent company business." Gerald stepped forward, his physical frailty belied by the strength in his voice. "The urgent business is the future and integrity of this company. We have evidence of serious financial improprieties that the board needs to address immediately." All eyes turned to Meredith, who maintained her composure, though a muscle twitched in her jaw. "I assume this is about the accounting irregularities my team has been investigating from the previous administration. I was planning to present our findings once the audit was complete, but if you'd prefer an interim report—" "No, Meredith," I said, speaking directly to her for the first time. "This is about the deliberate manipulation of financial data under your direction, both before and after you became CEO." The room went silent. Alexander, who had remained near the door, stepped forward to stand beside me. His presence there, clearly aligning himself with me rather than his wife, spoke volumes. Meredith's eyes narrowed as she looked at her husband. "Alexander, what is this—" "The truth, Meredith," he said quietly. "Something you should have considered before you started altering company records." Lawrence distributed folders to each board member. Inside, you'll find documented evidence of systematic financial misrepresentation dating back approximately 18 months. The manipulations primarily involve projects directly overseen by Meredith Johnson and show a pattern of inflated revenue projections, concealed expenses, and altered performance metrics. For the next 30 minutes, we presented our case methodically. Kyle walked the board through specific examples of altered financial records, comparing original entries with the modified versions. Janet provided emails showing Meredith explicitly directing these changes. I explained the broader pattern and its implications for the company's financial stability and regulatory compliance. Throughout the presentation, Meredith's demeanor shifted from defensive confidence to increasing desperation. She interrupted frequently, offering alternative explanations that grew less convincing as the evidence mounted. Her new CFO, realizing the seriousness of the situation, began physically distancing himself from her at the table. When we finished, Thomas looked grave. "These are extremely serious allegations with substantial supporting evidence. The board will need to consider this information carefully." Meredith stood abruptly. "This is a coordinated attack on my leadership by a disgruntled former executive who can't accept that her time has passed. Evelyn has manipulated her son against me and fabricated evidence to discredit me because she couldn't handle being replaced by someone younger and more innovative." "The documents speak for themselves," Patricia responded calmly, "and they're verified by multiple sources, including staff with no personal connection to Evelyn. I want to make one thing absolutely clear," I added. "This isn't about getting my job back. My concern is for the company and the people who work here. West Point was built on integrity and genuine innovation, not manipulated numbers and false promises." The board asked everyone except its members to step outside while they deliberated. In the hallway, Meredith approached Alexander, her voice low and urgent. "How could you do this to me? I'm your wife. You should be supporting me, not conspiring with your mother to destroy my career." Alexander looked at her sadly. "I supported you until I saw what you were willing to do to get what you wanted. It wasn't just how cruelly you treated my mother, Meredith. It was the dishonesty, the manipulation, the complete disregard for the company's values and the well-being of its employees." "Don't be naive," she hissed. "This is how business works in the real world. Everyone cuts corners, everyone manipulates the narrative. Your mother did too, she just covered her tracks better. No, she didn't, Alexander said firmly. That's the difference you never understood. Success built on deception isn't success at all. It's just failure waiting to happen. Meredith's face hardened. If you go through with this, we're finished. I'll make sure the divorce is very, very painful for you. Alexander didn't flinch. I know. I've already spoken to an attorney. It's worth it. After nearly an hour, we were called back into the boardroom. Thomas addressed us gravely. After reviewing the evidence, the board has made the following decisions. Meredith Johnson is suspended immediately from the position of CEO pending a complete independent audit of the company's finances. The CFO is also suspended. An interim leadership team will be established led by Gerald Wright as acting CEO and Patricia Chen as acting COO. Meredith began to protest, but Thomas continued over her objections. If the independent audit confirms the evidence presented today, the board will refer the matter to appropriate regulatory authorities. Ms. Johnson, you are to surrender your company credentials immediately and will be escorted from the building. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Meredith would be leaving exactly as she had forced me to leave, escorted by security with her career in shambles. But unlike her, the board handled the situation with professionalism and dignity without public humiliation. As Meredith was led away, her final glare at me contained pure hatred. I felt no satisfaction in her downfall, only sadness that ambition and dishonesty had corrupted what might have been a promising career. In the aftermath, Thomas approached me. Evelyn, the board owes you an apology. We failed in our due diligence regarding your termination and the circumstances surrounding it. Once the audit is complete and the company is stabilized, we would welcome discussions about your potential return to West Point in a suitable executive capacity. I thanked him for the offer, but made no commitments. The truth was, I wasn't sure what I wanted my future to look like. The experience had changed me in ways I was still processing. As we left the building, Gerald leaning heavily on his cane, but with renewed energy in his eyes, Alexander walked beside me. For the first time in weeks, he looked unburdened despite the difficult road ahead with his impending divorce. "What now?" he asked. I looked up at the West Point building where I had spent so much of my life. Now we help rebuild what was damaged, not to return to the past, but to create something better for the future. 3 months after that pivotal board meeting, West Point Technologies was a company transformed. The independent audit confirmed our findings and uncovered additional financial irregularities, leading to Meredith's permanent removal and referral to regulatory authorities. The scandal was carefully managed to minimize public damage with transparency about the issues and clear communication about remediation steps. Gerald's return as interim CEO brought stability during the turbulent period, though he made it clear this was temporary, given his health. The board established a leadership committee to guide the company forward, balancing experienced executives with promising younger talent. To my surprise, they asked me to chair this committee. "We need someone who understands both where we've been and where we need to go," Patricia explained when she extended the offer. "Someone who values both experience and innovation." I accepted, but with conditions. I wanted a new role focused on mentorship and strategic oversight rather than day-to-day management. I proposed creating a comprehensive mentoring program that would pair seasoned professionals with newer employees, fostering knowledge transfer while encouraging fresh perspectives. The problem was never about age or experience versus youth and innovation, I explained to the board. It was about valuing one at the expense of the other. We need both. The program launched with overwhelming employee support. For the first time, the generational divisions that Meredith had exploited began to heal as employees across age groups collaborated in meaningful ways. Alexander faced his own challenges during this period. His divorce proceedings were contentious, with Meredith attempting to claim a substantial portion of his assets and even threatening to sue for his shares in West Point. Lawrence connected him with an excellent divorce attorney who protected his interests, but the emotional toll was significant. "Some days I still can't believe who she turned out to be," he confided during one of our now regular Sunday dinners. "I keep wondering if there were signs I missed, red flags I ignored." "We all miss them," I assured him. She was skilled at presenting different faces to different people. The important thing is that when the truth became clear, you chose integrity, even though it was the harder path. Alexander's professional life, however, flourished. With Meredith gone, his natural leadership abilities shone through. The marketing strategies he developed helped rebuild West Point's reputation after the scandal, and he became an invaluable member of the leadership committee. Gerald's health improved somewhat once the immediate crisis passed. Though still frail, having purpose again seemed to revitalize him. He became something of an elder statesman for the company, attending key meetings and sharing his wisdom without micromanaging the new leadership. "I never expected to be back in that boardroom," he told me one afternoon as we shared coffee in his sunroom. "But watching the company return to its core values while embracing positive change has been deeply satisfying. You've been instrumental in that, Evelyn." "We all have," I replied. "It took the whole West Point family to rebuild." As for me, the journey from public humiliation to respected leadership had transformed how I viewed both my professional identity and myself. I realized I had defined myself too narrowly by my role as finance director. The new position allowed me to leverage my experience while continuing to grow and learn. The final piece of healing came when West Point implemented a new anti-ageism policy, explicitly recognizing the value of experience alongside innovation. The policy was named the Wright Adams Initiative, honoring both Gerald and me. When it was announced at a company meeting, I received a standing ovation from the same employees who had witnessed my humiliation months earlier. 6 months after Meredith's removal, I made the decision to transition to a part-time advisory role. Not because I felt outdated or unable to contribute, but because I wanted time to explore other aspects of life that I'd neglected during my intense focus on career. I began volunteering with a financial literacy program for underprivileged women, something I'd always wanted to do but never found time for. On my last day as a full-time employee, Alexander helped me pack up my new office. Unlike the rushed and humiliating exit Meredith had orchestrated, this was a celebration of transition, not an ending. "You know what I realized through all this, Mom," Alexander said as we arranged pictures in a box. "Success isn't about titles or power. It's about integrity and the lives you touch along the way. You taught me that not through lectures, but through how you lived your life." As we walked out together, employees lined the hallway applauding. At the entrance stood Gerald, Patricia, and many others who had stood by us during the difficult times. This time, there was no security escort, no box of belongings to carry out in shame. Instead, there was respect, appreciation, and the knowledge that I was leaving on my own terms with my head held high. The greatest revenge wasn't seeing Meredith face consequences for her actions, though justice had been served. It wasn't even returning to the company in a position of influence. The true victory was in rebuilding something stronger than before, a company culture where no one would ever again be dismissed for their age but valued for their contribution, where experience and innovation worked hand in hand rather than in opposition, where integrity mattered more than ambition. As I drove away from West Point that day, I felt neither bitter about what had happened nor triumphant over Meredith's downfall. Instead, I felt gratitude for the lessons learned and the community that had emerged stronger from adversity. And perhaps most importantly, I felt peace, knowing that sometimes the most painful betrayals can lead to the most meaningful growth. Have you ever experienced workplace betrayal or ageism? I'd love to hear how you handled it in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming adversity with dignity and strength. Remember, our true value isn't determined by those who try to diminish us, but by how we rise above their attempts. Thank you for listening, and I wish you wisdom and courage on your own journey.